Hello, and welcome to another episode of the TMG Expert Series podcast. I'm Kristen Pacheco of the McKelvey Group. Today we have Vinny D'Amore on the show to talk to us about Excel formatting. Vinny is a government pricing analyst for the McKelvey Group and is responsible for providing pricing support for federal government contractors. Some of the things he does for clients is RFP reviews, survey data research, and he also develops price and cost models to make sure they're compliant with the many RFP requirements involved. A very detail-oriented job, as you can imagine. And so because Vinny is deeply involved as the first line of defense, so to speak, for quality assurance reviews and competitive analyses, he's very familiar with Excel. And we're going to pick his brain on tips for formatting these Excel models to improve the quality of the end product, which of course benefits the entire pricing team and proposal process in general. So to raise the chances of a win. So Vinny, welcome. We're so excited to talk to you about this. You know, when we talk about pricing proposals, a lot of discussion goes into pricing strategy and teaming and all the high-end level planning that goes into winning. But you're going to talk to us today about the fine details of preparing a cost model, which we can't forget is super important because that's where the process begins. And it can make all the difference in keeping the pricing team in sync and well-positioned ultimately to provide a high-quality proposal to the government.
Yeah, so first, I'd just like to say thank you for having me, and I hope that someone that listens to this can walk away with some new information.
All right, so I'm just going to go right into the first question. We're going to get right into it. So my first question for you today is, what does good formatting mean for you and the McKelvey Group?
So for starters, formatting here at the McKelvey Group means a lot. Like having a clean, concise, and professional looking model is something that we strive for here. It allows us to navigate and use models internally, all while being efficient, but it also allows us to use them easier. Think about it. When you're trying to navigate a workbook, whether it's for you, your company, or someone else's company, you're just that much more efficient when the model is clean versus just thrown together. The way that I like to think of it is like an entree at a fancy restaurant. Like it's all about 50% presentation and 50% taste.
That's a really good analogy. So do you think having that clean, clear, professional looking model, like you said, does it help you win bids, or why is it so important to have that consistent formatting?
Yeah, so without a doubt, good formatting helps you win bids. Like I was saying before, good formatting helps you be efficient while working on or in the model, which in turn allows for a better end result. You got to think about when you're submitting it, who you're submitting it to. You're submitting it to the government. You're not just internally passing it around. So you want people to understand what you're sending them without them having to reach back out to you. So it's important for it to look good for that reasoning, visual purposes for when submitting to the government. It's also important to look good when you are passing around internally. When you have a good looking model, people are able to use it better. Everybody becomes more efficient. Like when you have a product that is easily legible, easily understandable, it will greatly increase your chances of winning and also give you upper hand on your competition. But like on the flip side, a poorly formatted model could be disqualified right away for numerous reasons. For example, information that you're trying to get across may be presented in a way that the person that's reviewing it doesn't understand it. So in the end, what you're trying to portray doesn't get across. Also, the type of document that you submit can say a lot about who you are as a pricer and your company as a potential client to the government. And if you're a company that is consistently bidding on government contracts, specifically to the same agency, you can build some kind of rapport with the people that are reviewing yours.
That absolutely makes sense. You're basically setting up a standard that people can expect from you.
Exactly.
Speaking of standards, is there any kind of formatting that is standard at TMG?
Yeah, so something that we start off on every single tab, on every single workbook that we do is put the very first bit of information, cell C2, and we take columns A and B and drop them down to a width of 1. This gives the data table that you're going to be eventually working on a lot more breathability, and it's not shoved up in the top corner of the sheet, and overall it's just more visually appealing. We also use different font colors, different types of cell shading, and different colors for tabs. We do this on every model we work on, mainly for organizational purposes.
That makes sense. It makes it look professional. But could you go into that second part a little more, the part about color coding?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to preface this by saying that these are all things that we do at TMG. So by no means you have to go and do this for your own company. But there will be a lot of information, so feel free to take it and apply it anywhere that you want. So here at TMG, we use a lot of different colors to help organize our data. For numbers and certain words, we use a light blue font to represent information that's been hand entered or user manipulated data. So anywhere that there is a data validation or a drop down menu or something like labor rates that need to be entered manually, it will always be a light blue font color. Next, we use the standard black font to represent where formulas are, and for the most part, these should not be touched. They should be left untouched because they're more than likely going to be auto-populated once another part of the sheet or another tab is filled out. Finally, we use a red font color to show us where plug values have been entered.
Gotcha. And so when you say plug values, you mean like things that are just placeholders, right?
Yes, exactly. We do this sometimes because we finish the skeleton of the model before the client can give us their labor or indirect rates. This allows us to make sure that our models are functioning properly, even if we don't have all of the information yet. And we want to make sure that where there is red font colored numbers or words or things along those lines, that those get updated once the client gets back to us with their things.
That makes a lot of sense. I would imagine that that would really draw your eye to what you're looking for in the model. Sometimes these models are huge, and so having those different variances and colors gets you right to where you want to be.
Yep.
And if there's an issue, you can identify it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Okay, so what about shading? What do you guys do for that?
Yeah, so for shading, we use user-entered shading and conditional formatting. Conditional formatting just being essentially shading that happens via a formula rather than you going in and coloring cells yourself. We use the standard highlighter yellow to represent somewhere that we want to come back to, whether it's for a subject matter expert's review or just to make it stand out amongst the rest of the cells. Anything that is shaded yellow gets removed before the final submission, unless there is something that the client must see, to which they would have to go back and remove it before the final submission. Next, we use like a light gray to represent cells that should not be interacted with because those will eventually be automatically populated as well. Same thing along the lines of the black font color, just don't touch it. Finally, we're using a light blue shading to do the same thing as the light blue font, and that's to show us and the user where data should be hand entered or manipulated.
Whoa, this is a lot of details. Obviously, for you listeners out there, this may be a lot to visualize and follow along with without a video. But I guess, Vinny, you're just giving some examples of some things that you can do for formatting and coding. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And how can listeners see this in action? Are there plans for a webinar soon?
Yeah, that is definitely something that is in the works.
Great. Gotcha. And when you say don't touch, are you talking about like when you send it to the client, you don't want them to manipulate what you've done underneath of those cells, right?
Yeah, exactly. So those formulas are all pulling from somewhere else that are already based off of where you'd have to hand enter in the light blue cells with light blue font. Those gray cells that have the black font will automatically populate and become visible once the information has been inputted. If you were to go and change a formula or accidentally press delete on one of those gray cells, it could mess the model up.
Gotcha. You definitely don't want that.
Yep.
Okay, and I know I've seen different tab colors used. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So tab coloring is important because sometimes we can get 10, 20, 30, 40 tabs on a single spreadsheet, and that when navigating through that, it could be difficult to find what you're looking for. So we use a dark blue to represent all of our internal analysis tabs. These are tabs that we've made on our own to give our client a better understanding of the information that we are providing them. We use like the same highlighter yellow that I was talking about before as a tab color, and this is a show where we input raw data. So for instance, when we get information from ERI, or the Economic Research Institute, we put all of that information into its own tab and color that yellow. Next, we use green to show where government exhibit tabs are. These are the final tabs that get submitted to the government that generally comes straight from the RFP if it's provided or if they're provided. And finally, we use red to represent tabs that are supplemental to those government exhibits. Sometimes information from the dark blue or yellow tabs aren't enough to just straight out populate one of the green tabs or the government tabs. So we use these red tabs or the supplemental tabs to help us build up that information to get those filled out properly. Eventually, once everything gets wrapped up, those red tabs are generally deleted.
That makes sense. It kind of organizes everything. Again, just to draw the eye to different things and what's important.
All of this information with font color, shading colors, and tab colors, which is supposed to be what, and so on and so forth on our key tab, which is where, like, it is what it is. It's a key tab. It tells us what the colors represent, and we also use it to mark any changes that we've made from versioning to versioning and so on.
Thank you, Vinny. That makes a lot of sense that you guys are keeping it organized with those different colors as a standard. But how do you guys name your models? Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, because I think that it's something that is just generally overlooked. So we want to incorporate everything important about the model in the actual file name itself. We include the RFP acronym, what stage it's in, if it's in a draft or final, how many amendments there's been, and how many times it has been altered internally. So say the contract's name is Systems Engineering Services, that's in the final stage. There's been 3 amendments and it has been altered internally 12 times. That file name will read as SES, which is the acronym for the RFP, cost model, put a dash, a lowercase v for what version number it is, and a 1. The 1 is for final, we use 0 for draft, 0.03 for 3 amendments, 0.12 for the 12 internal changes that have happened.
That makes sense. It's very organized. It helps you keep track when things have been changed. All right, I myself have to work with Excel models from time to time, and I've noticed something kind of annoying, and that's when I send my models to somebody, the colors change. What can I do to prevent that?
Oh, annoying for sure, because you're thinking like, oh, I'm sending this over with black font in a lighter background, but then when you send it over, it's automatically a black font and black background, and that just doesn't work. I don't know if we found necessarily a solution, but we have found a workaround for it in the meantime. All you have to do when you go to choose your color, whether it's for cells or for fonts, you want to go to the more colors option and press OK. What this does, it locks the color in with the corresponding RGB combination as well as the hex code. Something beneficial for this as well, if you really like a color that you've selected, you can take note of those colors, the RGB code and the hex code, or make a list of what those RGB codes and hex code is, because you never know when you want to use that same exact color again, and you can consistently reuse them if it's a color that you really like.
That's good. And I would imagine that as a team, you would save those colors in somewhere that you could all access later.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do you guys print format? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that we are pretty methodical when it comes to this. So on every document, we use consistent margins, same ones across every version. We make sure that information that we are printing is aligned to the center. So when it prints out, it's not to the top left, it's always centered. And everything fits to be by 1 page wide by infinite or however many pages long. Doing this makes sure that the font never becomes too small, so when you print it off, it's not legible. And finally, the orientation of the pages that are being printed fits the type of table that you're printing. So if you're printing a super wide table, you want to make sure that's on landscape mode as opposed to the opposite.
All right, and finally, one of the last few questions I have here is, what makes you guys take formatting so seriously? Why do you think it's so serious?
Ooh, I would say that that's a combination of wanting to put out the best product that we can that is clean, visually appealing, and easily understandable. We want to make sure all column widths and row heights are the same where they need to be, using accounting formatting versus currency formatting, and so much more. But I also believe that here at the McKelvey Group, we're a bunch of perfectionists. So us as human beings won't allow ourselves to put out a document that does not look good. And that is what drives us to take it so seriously.
That makes sense. It's all about being professional and having something that your clients can expect from you consistently.
Yeah.
All right. And finally, are there any tips or secrets you can give me or our listeners to become better formatters?
Ooh, that's a good one. Without a doubt, try your hardest to learn keyboard shortcuts. They are a lifesaver when it comes to saving time. You become so much more efficient. And it's not even something that is just used for formatting, but it can be used for filling out models entirely. Once you learn keyboard shortcuts for Excel, they then become applied to any other program that you use today. So definitely learn the keyboard shortcuts.
That makes sense. Can you give me an example of a keyboard shortcut? Like instead of clicking a bunch of different things, what is one that you use consistently?
So yeah, great question. If you were to say you have off to the side of an Excel document a bunch of columns that don't have any information in it. So it's just you have your table and your first like 5 or 6 columns, and then you have the thousands of columns all to the right of it. So yeah, just pressing Alt HOUC after you've highlighted every column that you want to hide, and it'll just focus on the table that you have left unhidden.
Gotcha. So it hides all those columns that are obsolete that you don't really need to see, the ones that are blank. So thanks again for taking the time to go over all this.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
And thanks to everyone who's joined us here for this podcast today. We hope you've gotten some really great information, and we look forward to providing more great podcasts soon. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Shiloh was good.